thought that was my stomach. It's okay, it's okay. So far, what did you read? Just what are some of your thoughts about what you read from a simplistic point of view? What's that?
There's two sides to every story.
Two sides to every story? You were gonna?
I was going to just say the way he kind of dropped down in the middle of everything. The perspective of the soldiers was, it just seemed like they were kind of not, I mean, they knew why they were kind of, but it just made it kind of eased you into it. It wasn't like, yeah, it was just more or less like, hey, you know, we have to make the country whole, you know. So it wasn't like a lot of extra chatter. It's just really nicely done.
Perfect. Yeah. One of the things is it's clear and it's concise. You're getting these two different perspectives about why this happened. For the rest of your students' lives, they're going to give different perspectives. Someone's going to say, this is a good president. This is a bad president. And they're going to have to decide. They're going to have to listen to information, and hopefully they'll go to the proper sources. And one of the reasons I'm such an advocate of primary sources is you want to hear from those people directly. So just a real quick activity. This will only take like 4 or 5 minutes, and it doesn't have to be well done. But I'm going to allow you to create your own character. So, you know, I've had people create, I'll give you some examples, because some people get a little, and I'm not a great artist. I actually studied calligraphy in China for about a year. Now, Bizai? Is that correct?
Yes.
Close enough? Okay. And so I studied for about a year, and my teacher, Lao Shi, he was probably about 90 years old. His daughter would translate for us, and he'd always make fun of like how I did my calligraphy because it was very sloppy. I had very sloppy penmanship, and he would just say, "You have the heart of an artist, but the hands of a Sasquatch." And so I do, and I have no shame in that. And students will see my artwork and go, "That's pretty bad." It's like, I know, but if mine's bad and I'm comfortable sharing it with you, you should be comfortable to share with me. So having said that, it doesn't have to be elaborate. I've had, Hoppy the hippo. I've had, let's see, what are some other good examples? Richard the rooster, the time traveler. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant. That's not the best example. But go ahead, groups of 2 or 3. Who's your character? And this is your person. I'm going to give you an opportunity to time travel.
Oh.
Here. Did you want to join these ladies up here, or choose where you want to hear? Then I'll give you pencils. You want pencils? I have markers. And you want markers, or are you fine with a pencil?
Thank you.
It doesn't have to be super elaborate.
Create our own time traveler. And I'm a terrible drawer. I'm not an artist. All right, so who do we want to
Your time travel.
travel?
You're just making your time
An
traveler.
animal, a
That's all you're doing.
person,
It could be a person, it could be an animal, it could be an insect.
an insect, a person, an animal.
I know. It's silly. It's different.
Another one.
Oh, I'm going to pick. Yeah, your creativity's gone. It's
No.
just like gone this afternoon.
Not true. Not true. Creativity comes
Okay.
with practice and exposure.
I'm trying to think of something we could draw.
You're just drawing a picture. That's
That might be more important than actually what it is, because I was thinking the Jaguars
But yeah, just
or Gru, but
who's your time traveler?
I don't know that I could draw a Jaguar.
Yeah, you're just making up a time traveler.
There you go, be a time traveler, go back to ASU, I like it.
As you go through your class, you can use this time travel at the start of the classroom, or have your students create their own.
I don't know, because it was Augusta College before it was Augusta State. So it's changed a couple times. But I've been here probably about 15 years, and it was Augusta State when I moved here. So, no, I did not. My daughter's going here now. Okay. I'm sneaking to see what people are doing.
Still working. Okay, it's okay. Okay. We just wanted to give you some exposure. So there are three main ways to kind of go through the drama aspect, and I'll explain each three, and I'll allow you to work on one for a little while. It's completely optional which one you want to work on. Number one is you can have your students just dress as characters. Sometimes we don't have all the money in the world. Most teachers do not. However, if you want to use the resource that I have, I'll give you my contact information, and you feel free to borrow whatever you need in your classroom. Pretty much all of these materials were donated by the Waynesburg Teaching with Primary Sources program, so they are funding us so that we can help you in turn. So please feel free to contact me. You can also make your own mask, have your students make their own mouse mask, and there's easy materials for that. Paper plates work really well for that.
That's a good idea.
You can use this to wrap around their head. And it's really simple, really easy. And like I said, you can have the students create their own character, or you can create the character and just have that be your class mascot. Completely up to you. I've done it both ways. I think both ways work. And so it's your decision as a classroom teacher. Another system that I like to use is puppet play. How many of you had puppet shows in your classroom before? Oh, excellent. How did that work for you?
I picked the wrong group to do it with.
Okay. Live and learn. Excellent. So what I like to do with puppet shows is however they design their character, they can create puppets on here. So you have a time-traveling monkey with a magic banana that will take them anywhere in time. I can find our time-traveling monkey. And so you can have a play where you can have cutouts of characters. For example, we're going to look at Andrew Jackson today. So you can have a cutout of Andrew Jackson. You can find that online, print that out, and have your students cut that out on their own. You can also have them cut out a Native American figure. Obviously, what the issue we're going to be looking at is the Trail of Tears, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So they can build their own structure. This is obviously, took me 15 minutes to do this, and it looks awful. And don't tell me it doesn't, because it does. And I'm fully aware of that. But like I said, it's live and learn. Your students will see you build one, you explain the process, they build their own. But they always let I work with gifted students, they usually rub in like how much better their artistic ability with their mind. It's like, awesome, you're not hurting my feelings, but they can create this. They got to create their own script, and so they can act it out. Usually groups of like 3 to 4. You have some people acting as a director, the puppeteers, and get an opportunity to have different roles within the group. And every group gets a chance to present. So you may have different interpretations of events. Like today, we're looking at an event, and we might have different interpretations. The next one is creating a comic book. This is actually one of my newer designs. And what I do is I have the students go through and develop their own comic book. So they would take pages very similar to what you have in front of you. And it would just be about 3 or 4 pages. So they would have the cover page. What should go on the cover page of a comic book? Title.
Author.
What else? Like character. Maybe the main character. Maybe the main character doing something, exciting. Like I don't know how many comic fans we have in here, but typically with comic books, you have like Superman or Batman. They're very heroic, or they're in the middle of a fight or something. And then you open up the comic book, and you usually have about 3 or 4 panels on each page. And then if something really exciting happens, it usually has what's called like a splash page. It's a larger page. So you're able to teach the students how minor events may lead to larger events. It's a very simple process. Also, you want them to learn how to properly structure a story. There's actually been a lot of reports, research studies done on 4th graders, and they found that 4th graders were having a hard time with sequencing. That means they couldn't put events in proper order. That means that they were putting the Civil War before the American Revolution. They didn't have that context, and so learning how to tell a story in sequence helps them. And there's simple ways to do that. You can have them start with just looking at a fairy tale, like the Three Little Pigs, and how that story is sequenced appropriately. How would they sequence that story? Ask them how would they sequence their life, and then how could they sequence a historical event? So you're constantly always starting with what they know, and then you're building on what they know. So the comic book example is it's pretty interesting for the students, especially at the beginning stages. Here's our event. Right? You have now traveled back to the year 1830. Andrew Jackson has made a decision regarding Native American removal. However, the Native Americans have a different interpretation. Andrew Jackson, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, he was considered the people's president. He had that terminology associated with him. However, he was also well known for the Indian Removal Act. So there's kind of a dichotomy there. Is he the friend of the common person, or is he a villain? And my students always had a hard time with this. Some of my students would say, well, I'm confused. Why is he on the $20 bill? Sounds like he did a lot of bad things. And I was just like, well, some people, it's based on your interpretation. How do you interpret it? And I do offer my opinion, but I save it till the end. I always want to have the students develop their opinions. And I'll find that sometimes we differ, but we always differ. My whole family differs. My uncle is this hardcore Republican who loves Ronald Reagan. Like, he has like a Ronald Reagan mug. He has a Ronald Reagan picture in his bedroom. Everything Ronald Reagan. But I have an aunt who's loves Bill Clinton, and you can just imagine how fun Thanksgiving is with those two individuals. And so I've learned to accept they have different interpretations of events. So I have to understand that my students may have different interpretations. They may have been raised with a different political scope. And addressing controversial issues, you have to discuss there are differences. And there are historians who think Andrew Jackson's a great president. He was a great president. There are historians who think he was a horrible president. And so there's evidence on both sides, and there's always both sides. So I try to present both sides as evenly as possible. There's some issues where I can't present both sides evenly, and I usually let the students know that I do have a bias, and this is where my bias is coming from, so that they know that I'm not going to be coming at it as fairly as I usually would, and they'll know that there's bias there and what bias looks like, and that helps them interpret data as well. So I'm going to give you a document. This is Andrew Jackson's message to Congress regarding Native American removal, and he had a unique perspective on this. And let me hand you out the Native American response to the removal. Did I already hand out Native American?
No, this is Andrew Jackson's message.
And these are all from the Library of Congress. I printed out obviously the transcribed, easy to read version for us. you're absolutely welcome to take these time. Like I said earlier, these will be provided online for everybody. So really quick with document analysis, this is also an important skill because you want to learn how to read documents appropriately. And I really like, we have to do with our highlighting, which works really well. Sometimes when I have people look at opposing views, I'll give them a highlighter and I'll say things that you think are positive, highlight in purple. The things that you think are not positive, highlight in green. And so you can kind of know, what supports your case or what does not support your case. And this is a really easy way for your students to start analyzing documents and starting to organize information in a way that helps them. Also, if there's something that doesn't make sense to them, they can also highlight that in yellow. So they can say, Mr. Walker, this doesn't make sense to me. Can you explain what they're trying to say? And I can go in and give them a little bit more detail. Because sometimes if I cover the whole document and they understand 80% of the document, then I'm kind of robbing them of that experience. So it really is an opportunity for them to look at the information, evaluate it, and make decisions. Do you know what it means when I say draw an inference? What's an inference drawing?
I just look at it like an analogy, like how can I pull from some.
It's very close. Yeah. And they're adjacent, they're in the same family. Usually an inference is when you notice something and you're making an opinion based on evidence. Like how many people in here like reading Sherlock Holmes or the modern Sherlock Holmes? He basically draws inferences. Like he'll say, well, somebody took off their wedding ring and there's a mark there. So he would go, oh, they're recently divorced. Like he's drawing an inference based on that information. And so typically, like looking at this information, what inferences can you draw based on these documents?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I go back and forth. I always tell people, you're one half modeling something, and the other half you're coaching. And sometimes, I go, okay, let me take my modeling hat off and put my coaching hat on. So now we're more in the coaching stage. So, like, what are some inferences that can be drawn from looking at these documents?
I can infer that the Indians weren't happy.
Yes, perfect. That would be a great one. Yes. What are some inferences on Andrew Jackson that you could draw?
He makes it sound like it's just the best thing that could ever happen.
Exactly, yes. It's interesting because if you read about him, he honestly believed, in his own words, that the Native Americans were just simple children and it was the job of the American government to take care of them. So the Indian removal, that was to help them. And he really thought that he was helping them. But then you could say, well, in our modern life, are we doing things that we think are helpful, but in actuality they may not actually be helpful? Like, are there parallels that can be drawn? So once your students had an opportunity to kind of look at this, the next phase is for them to decide. So as a teacher, which one of these mechanisms would you want them to use? Would you want them to create their own character? Would you prefer to go through the drama aspect with the play, or would you have a puppet theater, or would you have the great comic books, or would you give them the option of all three, so that way you could have that differentiation addressed. Students who are artists will probably be drawn to the artistic aspect of the comic book. Some students who may like to be hams and get up in front of everybody might enjoy that aspect. Students who are in the middle might enjoy this aspect. But what different modalities are we addressing with these activities? Is it hands-on? So you have that kinesthetic aspect? Auditory, visual. So you're covering all those aspects. So this helps a broad range of students. And I would teach gifted students in the morning, and then as the day went on, I would teach a more general ed population. But there were always these kind of constants that I've noticed with students. And the students enjoyed the variety. They liked the fact that we didn't come in and it was just, oh, we're all going to do this for the next hour. So I would have stations set up and people would go to their different stations and they could work on their assignments. And also I could go around and help people and talk to them individually and get a better sense of where they are. And then once I would have these created, I would use these as assessments. I have a rubric attached. I have an opportunity to kind of say, yes, there are some aspects you left out. Like I would say you're supposed to present both sides of this argument. That's 10 points. You didn't do that, so I have to deduct points for that. Would you like an opportunity to, address that? And try to raise your grades up a little bit more. So giving them different opportunities to improve. Also, something you want to consider with your students is that sometimes there are things that are difficult to measure. Can you measure somebody's energy level? Is there a way to factor in students' engagement, or say yes, you got a C in this assignment, but you were engaged, so your grade's a little bit higher. I mean, those are certain things to consider. And every teacher is different. Everybody has their own kind of game plan. But I'm going to give you a few minutes to get back in your groups and kind of discuss like which type of activity you would use and how would you assess whether or not they understood the information. And it's just a discussion. You don't have to write anything down.
Right. Yes, so use a time traveler and then he goes back and talks to each group, or how? Is that kind of how? Okay. Kind of so he talks to Andrew Jackson, gets his perspective, and then he goes and talks to the Native Americans. Yeah, that works. Yeah.
Then
that works.
Engaged, but if I have them sitting for more than 5 minutes, somebody's walking around. So I have to do kinesthetic. It has to be visual to them.
So how would you measure your success?
I've had a couple where I've actually
Probably do a
put together
rubric
a PowerPoint.
and just make sure that they included
As long as he's standing up because he's like this.
Jackson's perspective and the Native Americans' perspective. There's not a lot of, like he was talking about like sequence. There's really not in this. There's not a lot of sequence. So, I guess just how well they represent each side.
She said that he's steadily writing. So yeah, that's what you have to do. And so I use things like that. Tickets, I'll do a lot of tickets on the door. With that group, I'll give them a speaking note, and it'll be a broad range, or tell me something you learned today, or I'll put, I think I did it where I gave them a speaking note, and I said, okay, this is this with this, and I have the chart, put it on your way out the door. Things like that.
I think we have, most people kind of have their game plan worked out. So the next aspect that you want to consider is how do you approach this with your students? I mean, because sometimes something like this, they can get a little excited. I don't recommend trying to do this at the start of the year, especially the first day. I would stay away from these types of activities. Like you build towards this. You work in pairs, and you kind of see how they respond in pairs, and then you say, okay, let's try something standing up. It's gradual. And then once you kind of see that they're able to kind of handle more, then you give them more. So it's kind of like they have to earn that right. And there's been times where I've had groups where we're doing all these crazy things, and other groups where we haven't gotten to that point. They're saying, well, why aren't we, doing the other stuff that they are? It's like, well, we have to work towards that. It's going to take time, but we'll keep working on our behavior and we'll keep trying. And when we get there, then we'll try these types of things. So it becomes an award and something to strive for, as opposed to just everyone's doing it. It becomes special. It becomes unique. And I agree with Dr. Budelli. You don't want to do something like this every day, because as much as I love steak, if I have steak every day, you get tired of it. I mean, you need diversity. You need different things, and if this is what you do all the time, then it's going to run out of gas and it'll just become boring and repetitive. So you want to try different things that will have meaning. For example, in the spring, we'll do my history CSI activity. I'm sorry, I was on the fence. I was like, should I do the CSI thing or should I do the drama thing? I don't know. So, but I'll do the drama thing for our spring event. And that follows a very similar pattern. It's role playing again, and the students go through a process of, here's a historical case. I think the case that I use is, there was a ghost story in Charleston, And so there was a murder, so you're trying to solve this case, but you're also learning about the history of Charleston as you're solving the case. So every time you look at evidence, it has to do with like a historical landmark in Charleston. And so you're learning about that area, that hotel, or that house, or or the waterfront park, and stories attached to that area. And as you're learning, you're gathering more evidence. So you're collecting evidence, and you're moving through. And I think for students, sometimes they're so engaged in what they're doing that they're going, oh wait, I'm actually learning. And you're just like, yes, you're learning, but we're doing this in a way that's interesting and it's different, and hopefully that you're going to want to continue. And so hopefully my goal is, once that activity is over, that the students go, oh, we learned a lot about Charleston. I want to learn more about Charleston. Like, that's the goal. Like, oh, I want to know more about, the Trail of Tears and what the Native Americans had to go through. And so this is a vehicle to help get them interested in what, will hopefully really matter. And I think one of the best comments I ever had is, I set things up, and my students were just like, well, we're learning about civil rights today, right? I mean, yes. It's like, I know you have all this stuff set up. Can we just talk about civil rights? It's like, oh, okay. Yes, let's talk about the civil rights. So yes, I had all this stuff set up, and I was like, no, they just wanted to discuss, like, they were interested in the material. So your goal, the ultimate goal, is to get them interested in the material. And so yes, this is to help move them in that direction. And hopefully as they get older, you'll use this less and less, because in high school they would, if I presented this to high school people, they would be very upset. Like, that's just not how high school functions. And they just have a different mentality about how people learn. And so there's nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly okay. But typically, yes, you want to try and do more to help engage your students. So do you have any questions about this activity, how you would integrate? Yes?
How exactly do you model that for your students?
Which portion?
Like the puppet show, the comic book?
Oh, I used to do it all. I would just come in and I would, one day I would just come in dressed as a cowboy, and I would just go through an event, and then I would give them the event and say, okay, I went through this event as, as the cowboy. Now you create your own character and you go through this event. And I'll tell them, as I went through, I'll show them the rubric and I'll say, look, did I address both sides of this issue fairly? Yes. Did I? And so I kind of like have them grade me. And so, okay, now that same process you used to grade me, I'm going to use that process to grade you. And so I had a chance to model it. And then when I do the puppet shows, I would do something very similar. I would use the Trail of Tears, so I would have my time-traveling character. I usually would use a monkey or something, my time-traveling monkey, and then I'd have like Andrew Jackson, and we'd have a discussion on the Senate floor. So I'd have a picture. I would put like a picture over here. You can flip this around and put like, maybe make this the Senate floor. And so you can act it out, and you can tell students, or you can have a depiction of the Trail of Tears, and which I think is more traumatic for students. But that's your decision. And I would just go through the activity. Usually take about 15 minutes to go through. And so it's, given a time frame, you'll have about 15 minutes. This would usually take about 2 days to go through. Just my modeling, the explanation, working on it for the second half of class. They'd come back the next day, continue it, and then they would present. And usually it was, it was about a 60-minute time period. And so the groups were a little larger. Like I think as I taught, I let the groups get larger, and I should have had them smaller. Like it really should be about 2 or 3 people per group. But sometimes I'd have like 5 to 6, and I don't recommend that. But it seemed to work with my students, so I was like, it's less to grade. You start thinking, how much time do I have? I know. But like, okay, let's try to be economical with our time, because as much as I love teaching, a lot of our time is spent doing other things. So it was a way to be economical with my time. But I'd still suggest 2 to 3. But if you have really good students and they work well together, 5 or 6 might be okay. That's a case-by-case basis. And then my comic book, I create my own comic book character. And I would do this a few different times during the year. And one year I just had my character that I developed. I was Cowboy Curtis. And so I had them create their own, whoever their time traveler was. And would say, okay, we're going to look at this event. How would your time traveler interpret this event? And that would be the assignment. So it varies on how you want to structure it, person by person. It's your classroom. I always encourage you to just be as creative as you want, and try not to stifle creativity at any level. No, I wasn't sure if there was a follow-up question. And like I said, if you want to use these techniques or if you want access to any of the resources, I'll give you my contact information. And I share this with a few people. I have a philosophy that I don't believe in the ivory tower. I don't think we should be separate. I think we need to be on the same side. You know, I don't think that I should have a philosophy about education that should conflict with your philosophy about education. I think we should have common goals, common objectives. We should talk to each other. Oh, sorry. And I have no issue going into schools, doing presentations. I enjoy going into different schools.
You would do it?
Yes. Why do people seem so surprised when I do that? But I don't, like, is it just not something people do? I mean,
Did you know they probably do?
okay. Well, I mean, I know there's a lot going on, but I do see my responsibilities to the schools first. That's where my responsibilities are. And because that's the most important place. I mean, honestly, you're developing the future. Like the whole theme of our get-together day is the 21st century. Like we're trying to build, help individuals grow and develop to be good citizens, to help each other, to care for each other, because they have a long road ahead of them. You know, I think as a whole, there are a lot of decisions that have to be made that require people who can think, require people to make a commitment beyond just themselves. And I think that's one of the things that we have to kind of strive for, especially in social studies. I mean, we can't be isolationists, especially in this day and age when we're so interconnected with the rest of the world. So yes, I have no issue going into school. I enjoy it, absolutely. I don't mind. You know, I don't know. I'm pretty agreeable. You know, I've been in so many different schools. I can walk into school and kind of like tell what the climate of the school is, and you know, I can fit right in pretty easy. Not a problem for me. So yes, happy to help in any way that I can. But are there any additional questions about trying to integrate these types of activities? Are there some drama activities that you've used in the past that you would like to share or suggest for integration? Yes.
I did Mike Master Moore.
All right. How does that work?
And, well, they liked it. I came in there all dressed up and bling and wrapped it, and I had it on a PowerPoint, and the second time they wrapped it.
I don't know if this would help you. I found this auto-tune app, so you can like, you know, you'll say something to it, it'll like change your voice, kind of like, you know, like, yeah, it auto-tunes. I don't know. I have a horrible voice, but that's the robot voice. That's which one this is. That's the natural voice. But you can like augment it to make different sound effects. So you know.
What's the name of the app?
Let's see here. Voice synth.
I have one up here. Oh, voice synthesizer.
Mhm.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure. And there's all sorts of things that you can use to kind of, you know, make things more interesting and enticing for your students. And, you know, there's all sorts of apps that I've seen that I've used and I've tried to integrate to my teaching. Dr. Kuo here has created an app. She has an interactive app for students to help students learn Chinese. Not sure how to integrate that one yet, but she actually, where is that one? Learn Chinese app. Yeah, there's all sorts of apps. There's a lot of social studies apps. I know you just went to the technology training with Miss Armstrong, and I know that she's, I thought this was interesting. She told me that, like, she gave a presentation to one of my groups earlier, and she said it really wasn't her best presentation. I thought it was great, but she said, no, there was a lot of things going on that wasn't my best. I took a lot of time to make sure that I got the best resources possible. And I was like, okay, I believe you. So, you know, people so far have been very happy. Let's see here, the conversation. Where's the slide? Where does it lead? That was me, by the way. That was my awful butchering of name. But it's fun.
Because I teach special education, and I found using dramas and plays is very important to our kids, because many of our kids, our students cannot read the entire test. So using dramas and plays can help them understand the test, and then help them remember, and then we go back to read the test. So I found it's very important.
Excellent. Yes. Yeah, I'm not sure if you noticed, Dr. Poe came from Michigan State, and she has 2 degrees, one in special education and one in curriculum.
In literacy.
Literacy. So she was very well, very knowledgeable on the subject. So having her support is very helpful. So we'll go ahead and switch gears. We're going to head downstairs. We'll have a quick wrap-up session. It shouldn't take any more than like 5 minutes, and we'll give you a little time to rest and relax. And we'll have a quick drawing and just some information and update about the next workshop. I'm glad everybody was able to attend. And your Saturday is not easy, and we do appreciate your time. Hopefully, this will benefit you and those who work with you.